has become such a daft thing. Meanwhile, Connie attends a party with her sister and their friend, Duncan. There, she meets a handsome and well-mannered gentleman named Clifford Chatterley. They both chat and click with each other, and then dance together. After some time has passed, they both get married. They both accept each other while the scene shifts between both of them making love to each other and showing Clifford's war experiences. They show Clifford in the war, giving orders and getting hit badly. He falls on the ground and sees Oliver Mellors shouting, "Advance!" Clifford survives, and the Army Medical Services bring him home, where his wife Connie and his maids and servants are waiting for him. They drop Clifford off, and it's then revealed that Clifford is now disabled. He can't feel his legs anymore. Clifford and Connie talk about which doctor Clifford should visit. He tells Connie he's going to visit the best doctor for the incurables. This is when it's revealed to Connie that her husband is now permanently disabled. She tries to cheer up Clifford that he still looks very healthy and is all right. She then exits the room and cries because she could not believe that her husband is permanently damaged and their lives are ruined. Her maid, Mrs. Betts, reassures her that her husband needs time. She agrees, but then hears the noise of a gun being loaded from the inside of a room. She runs into the room and finds Clifford holding a gun to his head and telling her that this was bound to happen. She jumps on him to steal the gun. Both fall down on the carpet, and Connie throws the gun away, telling the maid to leave them alone while Clifford cries. Connie tells him that she loves him, and he will always have her. He says he's only going to have her out of guilt and pity. She tells him no, out of love. We see Oliver Mellors in the war writing a letter to his beloved lover, Bertha. He writes that there are no words to describe his emotions he has for her, and he cannot wait to see the sight of her. While writing the letter, he realizes that the sound of gunfire and blasts have stopped, meaning that the war is over, and his eyes get all teared up with a sense of joy and relief. He goes back to his town to see Bertha. He reaches her house and sees her from the window, only to discover that Bertha is seeing someone else and is pregnant with that person. Heartbroken, devastated, and tired from the war, poor Oliver Mellors walks away. Oliver now reaches the Clifford's residence looking for a job. He meets Clifford and talks his way through. He finds out that Oliver worked in the army. He asks him which regiment Oliver served. He tells him that he served in 1/7th, which was under Clifford's command. Clifford, despite seeing Oliver the moment he got attacked during the war, does not remember him, but hires him because of that, and tells him that Betts will meet him at 6 o'clock at the gatehouse, and Oliver will be the new gamekeeper. Betts brings the very first of motorbikes for Clifford. He drives around his yard and enjoys it, while everyone else tells him to slow down or he might get hurt. Clifford then goes into the woods on his new bike with his wife Connie, who's riding the horse. They both go to Oliver, who is hunting. Clifford introduces Oliver to his wife Connie for the first time, and tells her that Oliver Mellors used to serve under the regiment in the 1/7th. Clifford wakes up and gets ready for his bath. Mrs. Betts arranges Mrs. Bolton to give Clifford his bath because of his disability. Connie insists Mrs. Betts let her wash her husband. She hears Clifford and Mrs. Bolton chatting up quite intimately. Connie gets jealous and confronts Clifford that she doesn't like Mrs. Bolton's intimacy with him. Clifford assures her that she has nothing to worry about because Mrs. Bolton is his servant, and he feels comfortable with her giving him a bath. Clifford leaves for a meeting, and Connie, a bit upset, goes to Oliver Mellors to give a duplicate key to Oliver's chambers. Oliver tells Connie, a bit aggressively, that she did not have to do that all on her own. She leaves, and later that day, Oliver Mellors sends a letter to Connie, apologizing to her for his earlier behavior. She heads down to the woods again to see Oliver. She watches him from afar secretly, working and banging a hammer, shirtless. She comes out of hiding and talks to him about the letter of apology he had sent to her. She asks him why he sent such a small letter by walking such a long distance. He tells her that he had to say it early on, before it was too late. She asks him what if her husband had read it. He replies that it was intended that she would not tell her husband because he had seen men suffer from worse fates in a situation like this. Afterwards, she leaves, but it starts to rain, and there's no other place to go, so the only option left was Oliver's cottage, because it was the only shelter that was near them in the woods. They both go to his college and light up a fire to warm themselves. Oliver gets uncomfortable and takes a side. Connie thinks he's embarrassed and tells him to sit with her and warm himself too, but he tells her that if they were to be seen like this, he could lose more than just his job. Connie sees the rain has stopped, and she bids him a good day and leaves. At night, Connie gets in bed with Clifford and tries to make love to him. He stops her to thank her and tells her that it's of no use, because he can't feel anything. She tells him that they could do other lovemaking things, but he refuses and tells her that he's too tired and wants to go to sleep. So the both of them go to sleep, sad and disappointed. The next morning, the doctor arrives to do some tests on Clifford's legs. They electrocute his legs to bring life back to them. Connie sits alone in the library while hearing Clifford's screams. Half the day passes by while testing Clifford's legs, yet no positive outcome. Connie busts into the room and tells the doctor to stop this madness and leave. The next day, Constance visits Oliver Mellors again. She sees that he's made cages for little chicks. She asks him if she could touch the chicks because she had always wanted to hold them. Oliver takes a chick out of the wooden cage and gives it to her. She picks up the chick in her hand. Oliver sees the chick's interaction with Connie and tells her that it seems like being held by her makes the chick feel like it's being held by its own mother. This reminds Connie of her own mother, and she starts to cry. Oliver tries to console her and apologizes. He grabs Connie's hand and hugs her. She hugs him much more intimately. They both go inside Oliver's cottage, and she tries to kiss him, but he stops her. She asks him if he's afraid, because he doesn't seem like a cowardly type to her. He tells her that he's only afraid of the world in her. She tells him not to be afraid of that, and they both kiss. Oliver lights up the fire and sets a sheet down on the floor for them to sleep on. He takes off her clothes, and they both make passionate love. Connie's husband being disabled from underneath the torso and unable to make love is one of the drives that compels Connie to cheat on her husband with someone as hardworking, honest, and handsome as Oliver Mellors. Connie sits down with Clifford one morning and tells him how fast time flies, and there's nothing left to do. He tells Connie that perhaps it's time to make amends. Connie tells him that she would like to visit her sister, to which Clifford agrees. They visit her sister Hilda and throw a party. Connie talks to her sister, and her sister finds out that there's a new man in Connie's life, given Clifford's current situation. She makes Hilda swear not to tell anyone, and she agrees. Connie tells her that she's having an affair with her husband's new gamekeeper. Connie sees the pause and the shock on her sister's face. She gets worried and tells her that she was just making all that stuff up, and she should have seen the look on her face. At the party, Connie's friend Duncan arrives, and Connie is surprised to see him because she doesn't remember inviting him. Clifford leaves Connie alone, telling her that he's tired. Duncan asks Connie for a dance, and they both dance together. Duncan asks her that she could have any man in the world, but she went for Clifford. She reminds him that he wasn't crippled before. The next day, Clifford sits with Connie and confronts her about their previous arguments on why Clifford desires a child, an heir to his legacy, who can inherit his lands, but they can't have it because of his disability. He reveals that he was the one who invited Duncan because he knew Duncan liked Connie, and he's smart, charming, and successful. Clifford thought Duncan was the perfect test for his mission for an heir. Connie gets furious and tells Clifford that he's sick and a twisted person. Clifford tells her that their heir is important, and the bigger pain and shame for him is that another man would come and make love to his wife. The act that God has stolen from him under his roof while he turns his head away, that the humiliation is his. Connie leaves and goes straight to Oliver Mellors to make love to him. After their love session, Oliver gets a bit worried that people are going to find out about their secret relationship. She tells him not to worry, but he says that people will definitely think or suspect something because of how often Connie comes to visit him. She says no one notices anything. Oliver says that the lady of the manor cannot come and go without people noticing. After this, Connie and Oliver head to a carnival where they shoot some stuff and win caramel apples. Oliver tells her that this is what normal life looks like. They kiss, and a person purposefully runs into Connie. She yells at him, and he walks away without apologizing. Oliver tells her that he'll take care of them. He sees the same guy playing with a hammer. He asks him to hand him the hammer to hit the target. They give it to him, and he smacks the hammer right on the guy's foot, calls him a fat bastard, and runs away with Connie laughingly. They both run into a lobby where they both share a kiss and start to really like each other a lot. The next morning, Connie checks her belly, and she sees that it's gotten a bit bigger, indicating that she's pregnant. She goes straight to Clifford and tells him that she's pregnant now. Clifford gets caught by complete shock and tells Connie that she made him the happiest man in the world. He further asks her about the man who is responsible for impregnating her. She tells him that it shouldn't matter to him, and she'll take care of it. Afterwards, Clifford and Connie both go to the woods. Connie asks him where they're going, and he tells her that he's going to see the pheasant trees, and wants to hear Oliver Mellors report on the progress. Connie tells him to forget it, because the birds will be disturbed. He says they'll be fine. Connie stops while Clifford still rides his way to Oliver's cottage. Oliver appears from behind Connie, and he greets her and kisses her again. Clifford honks to call her, and they both stop kissing, and she runs to Clifford so he doesn't suspect anything. Clifford's motorbike starts to get rusty, as all machines do, and its engine fails. Connie tells Clifford that she's going to get some help, but Clifford refuses, saying that in her current pregnant state she must not. This is the first time the news has been shared to Oliver, and he gets upset. Clifford asks Oliver to push his motorbike, and maybe that might help kick off the engine. Oliver tries to push the bike again and again, and finally the bike starts, but Oliver ends up hurting himself. Clifford goes back to the mansion, and Connie goes to Oliver's to address the whole pregnant situation. They end up getting into a huge fight. Oliver thinks Connie used him for personal benefit, that she just wanted a child from him because her disabled husband was not physically capable of doing it himself. She tells him that the baby had nothing to do with this, and she wants him. But Oliver bursts on her about why he does not want to have children, and what they do to kids in this time. He tells her that women just marry to have land and money, while people like him rot. He tells her to go back to her husband. She gets very sad and runs away. Later on, Mrs. Bolton visits Oliver's cottage and finds no one there, but finds a book of poems that belong to Lady Chatterley, aka Constance, aka Connie. Mrs. Bolton sends Clifford a letter of urgency. She figures it out and exposes it to Clifford that Connie is having an affair with his gamekeeper Oliver Mellors, and Mellors is the father of her child. Clifford yells at her, saying how dare she bring this foul profanity into his house, and that she's out of her mind. Mrs. Bolton proves it to him and tells him of the injustice the likes of people like him cause. Clifford then confronts Connie and tells her to get away from him. How dare she commit such a pathetic act? Connie goes back into the house and confronts Mrs. Bolton and asks her how she found out. She tells her that she found her book and connected the rest of the dots. Connie corrects her and tells her that she loves him and cares for him, and she did not use Oliver Mellors to get pregnant. Mrs. Bolton realizes what a huge mistake she's made and tells Connie to stop Oliver Mellors before he leaves. Connie runs to Oliver's cottage and finds him later, and reunites with him and tells him that she's madly in love with him, and he